Hi, my name is SRIDHAR. I'm the Festival Director of Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. And we are in the third week of the festival. And you must have all watched this brilliant documentary film, Pride and Protest, which is nominated in the Best Documentary Feature category. It's been directed by BLAISE from UK. The film, basically, Pride and Protest, is a film synthesis of the many conversations shared by the Rainbow Films team on important but often ignored issues made by QPOC about racism within the larger queer community, as well as issues around intersectionality and visible diversity in the more mainstream and white heteronormative society they live in. And it's such a fantastic documentary, Blaze. You've captured such huge, wide range of emotions and also the protest on the streets. Congratulations on making such a brilliant film, and congratulations to the cast and crew for being part of this particular amazing documentary. And I hope the jury members award the film. We don't know that. We're going to find out on September 5th at the award ceremony. And today to talk to us, the Q&A, we have Blaise Singh, the filmmaker, and we have VANEET MEHTA, the cast and crew member, and also we have MANPREET, DHINDSA, cast and crew member. So thank you all for joining in this conversation. Really happy to have you. What expectations did you have from the QPOC community when you made this doc? Did you have people in South Asia in mind when you're making this documentary?
Well, just to give you some backstory of how this project came about. So it was created through a charity, which is called Make a Difference Entertainment, a charity that I set up or helped set up in 2014. And the idea behind the charity was to work with people from BAME and LGBT plus Q plus communities to help them to develop skills and confidence to make it within the creative industries. So in particular, we're focusing on film, TV, video production. So Rainbow Films was one of the projects that we had run at MADE, and previously we had run a number of projects working in particular with young people. And it just so happened that over the years, we started to find that a lot of LGBTQ plus people were attracted to our projects, and people who are also from the people of color communities who identified as LGBTQ plus. So we decided that there was a need to create a project that worked specifically with those communities of interest. And it just so happened that Rainbow Films was that said project. And within the project, what the idea is that we would meet weekly, and we would meet every Saturday at West London Film Studio, MADE's base. And it would be an opportunity for us to gather together and work collaboratively to produce a documentary. So the remit of it really was overall the outcome specifically was that we would get together and people would make new connections, and they would also be responsible for the control and the creative control of the project. So it just so happens that a majority of the group were South Asian, and that's reflected in the fact that we're based in Hayes, which is right next door to Southall. And for anybody who knows what Southall is, it's the largest Punjabi community outside of the South Asia. And we were lucky enough to have some really great participants, obviously the ones who are here today. And they were instrumental in deciding on how the documentary was shaped and the narratives that were involved. And it just so happened that because they were from the South Asian community as well, they were able to feed in those experiences to really craft something that was a very intimate portrait of their experiences, being queer, being South Asian, living in modern Britain. So we didn't necessarily have South Asia in mind when we were creating it. We were thinking about the communities that we serve as an organization, and also who we were trying to reach. And funnily enough, when we first started, we thought it was just going to be shown to the local community. It's just going to be shown to a few of the people who live around the area, work around the area. It'll be a very small showcase that we've done before in the past. And it just so happened that we decided to send this off to BFI Flair, which is one of the biggest LGBTQ plus festivals in Europe. And we didn't think it was going to be selected at all. We just thought, okay, it's a film that we put together, and bearing in mind that, all the participants didn't have any formal training or experience in documentary making. I was there to facilitate sessions, of course, and help them and support them. But, a lot of this was completely new to everyone. So when we started out, we thought, okay, first and foremost, let's create something that we feel very comfortable in creating, and also create something that will help inspire other people and help for them to feel that there's others out there like them. So just the process of creating this documentary, I thought was just amazing, how the fact that everybody kind of came together, and every person who was involved, like the team who are here present today, brought something unique and different to the mix. You know, everybody had different life experiences, different skill sets. You know, you've got two fabulous networkers here in the group, VANEET and RICO. They were able to connect with so many members of the queer community and help us to gain access to events and gain access to contributors. And then we had MANPREET, who was also a very talented singer-songwriter as well. So it was just really great to be able to bring these people along. And the fact that the people who came to the project already had activism in their hearts and in their minds, and they were thinking about that, not even intentionally, just by the day-to-day activities that they were doing. Even the fact that VANEET's very good at Twitter and social media, and RICO was already thinking about, you know, finding their place in the community and how they can give back and how they can inspire people. You know, these were things that we thought, let's play to strengths, and yes, let's utilize these aspects of everybody's personality and put them to the forefront. And that's how the film essentially came about.
How long was it? How long did the project take from start to finish? Was it a long shooting process? Was it a longer editing process? Usually, when you shoot such documentary films, the editing becomes really a massive endeavor, because there's so much of footage and you don't know what to keep and what to leave, etc.
So the project was 2 years. It was supposed to span over 2 years originally, and the idea being is that we were funded by an organization called the People's Health Trust. So we had the remit to actually it was 1.5 years. It was 18 months. We had a remit to deliver weekly sessions. They didn't necessarily fund us and say, look, you need to make a documentary. That was something that kind of came about through the conversations that we had with the group. So it was kind of like a consensus that the group had, that they wanted to create something practically with the skills and the resources that we had given them. But the whole process, the weekly sessions and the filming, it took several months, and only because we were only meeting once a week originally, but then when it came to shooting, you know, we'd meet more often and we'd have specific days where we'd go out and shoot things. But the editing was a mammoth task. It took forever. I mean, we did get some of the participants to help out with little bits of editing here and there, but essentially I took lead on the edit purely because I just felt overall it would have just made more sense that one person takes responsibility for it. But I was quite glad that the group really liked the presentation of it, and they enjoyed watching it. They felt that it served its purpose, and it maybe, you know, went beyond their expectations in that respect. So it was a lengthy process, I give it that. But if we were doing it as a traditional production, you know, we had a major budget, you know, things would have been differently. But I think overall we pulled together really well, and we did tremendously well with the resources that we had, which was pretty much next to nothing, if you think about it, compared to other documentaries that you might see on TV and film.
So thank you for sharing the thoughts. I want to just go to VANEET and MANPREET. So basically, you both are credited as researchers in the film, you know. So what kind of research you had to undertake, and how long was the process? Were you able to find access to the community members whom you wanted to speak to, you know? MANPREET, you want to go first on that?
Sure. So we were credited as researchers because, like Blaise said, the idea that we had for the documentary was very different to how it actually turned out. And originally, it was supposed to be just focused on queer people, not necessarily just people of color. And we were doing research. Me and VANEET were actually I guess you could say we were put into the section that was supposed to be about people of color. And we were doing research on how queer identities tend to be rejected in the community of being I don't know, of South Asian communities or Black communities, and just any sort of ethnic minority. They're not as accepted. So we wanted to look at that, but for some reason a lot of people just didn't really respond to our emails, our requests to have research, and then eventually I think it's safe to say we kind of became our own research in a way, because Blaise at some point had said to us, okay, well, if no one else is going to help us, why don't we be the main part of this documentary? And said that, well, look, what do we want? What things do we want to achieve within our own community? What do you want from this? And then that's how, from my perspective at least, that's how I used, like, well, BLAISE helped me look for events that involved artistry with being South Asian. And that was essentially my research. So that's why you see me in the documentary going to people like Ryan Lanji and asking questions about what it's like to, you know, be someone who is in the arts and be queer. You see events like Hangama, and you see how people are sort of finding themselves in communities like that. So I think that's what it meant in regards to research. It was quite different to what we originally planned, but it was more so, what kind of places and what spaces do we think the world needs to see? And that was what we went to look at, because there wasn't, I truly don't believe there's a documentary like ours that shows the unique safe spaces that no one really knows about. I feel like a lot of documentaries document struggles, but we wanted to document what is actually out there for people like us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think I remember in the early stages, we were like storyboarding different things and thinking of the people who could be in it. And it went from like us just being behind the scenes, being like, okay, here's the storyboard, here's the script, here's what they might say, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, now we're doing it. It's us. Oh, okay. Hi, I guess I'm in front of the camera now. It was a really weird moment when it switched. And I was like, oh, I guess I need to go interview people. But wait, you're filming me? That's weird. And then suddenly it became about us and our own individual things. I know we were like discussing like a coming out storyboard, and suddenly it was about like MANPREET's story about what would happen if she came out. It was really interesting the way it changed. And yeah, we were definitely finding blockers. You know, I was reaching out to people on like Twitter and Instagram. We were emailing people. People were not that responsive. But when we started engaging into the community, suddenly the community started engaging back. And it was very specific. It was very obvious who was interacting with us. And a lot of it was the other queer people of color, the other queer people of color who struggled in a similar way to us. I think one of the more interesting ones was when I was just like at an event and I was talking to some people who were from UK Black Pride who were also at this event. And I was speaking to one of them, and then the next thing you know, she's like, oh yeah, you know, let's like chat and stuff, followed each other on like social media, and then she's reaching out to me. She's like, we got UK Black Pride coming up soon, and all the people who are filming, who want to film for us, are white crews, white people. It's going to be through a white lens. I don't like this. And she was like, here's the number for this person, here's this for this person. And suddenly I was like sending stuff to BLAISE and being like, there's these people who want to talk to us. And we got like AAA backstage passes to Black Pride. I'm like front row MEK. And it was like, it was incredible to like have that experience of like the community really seeing what we're doing and saying, yes, we want to be a part of this. And it will happen through us just like going out there and doing it ourselves and engaging with the community and them going, we like this, keep going, and pushing us further.
Right. So that's so interesting. The process organically evolved, and you people were in front of the camera, behind the camera, all over the place. That's fantastic. RICO, coming to you. What do you think? What do you think roles of documentaries like this? Do you think how can it change mindsets? Do you think documentary films can play an active part with the QPOC communities changing other people's mindset about QPOC communities per se? You know?
I think it's difficult to understand what it's like to be part of the QPOC community unless you've sort of seen a documentary, because, I mean, let's say, for example, you're the only POC person in an all-white space. It's very, very difficult to talk about race relations. And you do feel as if, you know, oh, here's the QTOC person talking about race relations again. It is uncomfortable. So you do feel as if you're, when someone says something which is like politically incorrect, you probably won't even correct them because you want to make people feel uncomfortable. But with documentaries, you're speaking your truths, and that's a distinction. So you have a license to just be as honest as possible. And I feel as if a lot of people who've watched the documentary who happen to be some white or have some sort of position of privilege, whether it be colorism, I have mentioned that I didn't realize it was that bad or that difficult for members of our community. And, documentaries like this to make a difference.
Yeah, in fact, for me also, you people were very brave in actually covering so many different aspects. And also, how was it covering the anti-gay protest, which opens the film, do RICO or Blaise want to talk about it? I felt it was so challenging to enter that space, the anti-gay protest and actually carry out a filming,
I wasn't there for that one, so I think Blaise is the best person.
Yeah, I mean, these protests had been going on in the background, as we were running the session. So what we had actually gone to was probably one of the climatic points of the protests. And we were lucky enough in that, if that's the right word to use, is to be able to go and capture it on that day, because we had planned to go to Birmingham Pride anyway, because we were going to meet one of the other contributors. And we were going to film there, but we thought, well, why not go and stop off there on the Friday before and see what's happening? And, it was quite frustrating anyway, because we were seeing the protesters and then we were seeing people on the news that were just so narrow-minded in the way they were presenting their arguments. And, there's so much that you want to say. Obviously, the people who are protesting are also from marginalized communities as well. So the assumption is that you would understand what it feels like to be marginalized, to be sort of singled out and victimized or presented in a certain way. So it was just being there, the tension was obvious. Obviously, until I speak, people don't think that I belong to the LGBT community. Visibly, I look like I might be, I don't like using this word, but straight passing or, straight looking. But obviously once I start talking, then it's a bit more apparently. So in a way, I found myself filtering what I was saying because I didn't want to attract attention to myself as a filmmaker and say, oh, I'm queer and stuff. So luckily we had Farhan there on the day, and Farhan was doing this anyway. Farhan was challenging them by just asking simple questions about, why do you feel this way, and they were also recording videos. So Farhan has a YouTube channel that they were recording, and we saw these YouTube channels before we went, and Farhan had also applied to be on the project as well. So we were like, this is the person that we need to be out there. And it was just great because everything that we ended up shooting on that day, we could have, as I said this before as well, we could have made the whole documentary about this whole protest. But we were just like, well, no, why give them more coverage? They've already got BBC, ITV, everybody else is covering them. No one's hearing our side of the story. No one's really willing to do that. So why don't we start with that, start with the problem, and let's work our way towards showing what we're doing as a community and how we come together and how we celebrate what we do. And that was how the idea kind of came about, is to show that. And it was necessary, I feel, to kind of be there to experience that, and also be able to provide a counter narrative to some of the misinformation that they were spreading outside those school gates. So it was really important. But it was an intense experience. And even watching it now, I still feel triggered. I still feel anxiety watching that. It's not a pleasant viewing.
For me also, this was very unpleasant. Farhan being dragged away at the Pride march, by the police. For me, that was really triggering a lot. I felt it was so brutal the way he was manhandled by the police people.
Yeah, and I think it was the reason why we put that in there. I thought it was important to show that this is what we experience as people of color. I mean, when I was growing up and going out and finding my way around London town, there were so many times that we would just be told members only. You're not allowed in this club. And we'd be like a group of South Asian people that would come to the door. The white people would be let in, but we would suddenly it's members only. And I'm like, well, they're not members. How are they getting in? We have this that we carry with us all the time. So anytime that we are at an event and we're challenged by security, we're already bringing that experience with us. We experience this forcibly being removed out of the venue. It's happened to me as well several times. I've just been at a venue and I've been forcibly removed for just being there, and it's just, you're not given an explanation sometimes. So it was quite important to see that aspect of it, and also see that not only do we have challenges within our own racial communities, we also have it within the LGBT community. We don't feel like we belong, and that showing, that visibly removing of Farhan was that that epitome of that's how we feel we don't belong in certain spaces because we're not made to feel welcome.
So Rico, you want to talk about that? Like, I mean, how does I know that like recently there was a kind of a standoff between the Black Lives Matters and the Pride London, how do you see that particular standoff, and what are your thoughts on that, and how important it is to focus on Black Lives Matter?
Following on from Black Lives Matter, Liz Truss did say that it was a, what would you say? It was fashionable to protest for Black Lives Matter. And then the government issued a report that effectively said that racism doesn't exist in the UK, which is just so hilarious, to be honest with you, considering the Runnymede Trust does nothing but issue research reports proving the fact that racism does still exist in the UK. I do know that the Equality Office disbanded the LGBT panel relatively recently. So, if you have an Equality Office that doesn't have a steering group for LGBT issues, you're not going to understand the community. So the current Equality Office is not really doing its job effectively, and they are getting more and more involved with trans issues, and they're making ill-informed decisions as far as I'm concerned. So, but the intersectionality discussion about being part of two groups, specifically part of the POC group and the LGBT community, unfortunately, we do receive disproportionate amounts of homophobia and transphobia and biphobia within our family units, and therefore there's disproportionate amounts of mental health issues. That's not because of being trans, it's just because of just being not necessarily invited in your family unit. Anxiety, depression, homelessness, it compartmentalized issues to the extent where we find their own chosen family. It's incredibly common for queer individuals to have chosen families. And yeah, I was working on a diversity video for mermaids, and part of that, a lot of people were saying in the video itself that we're not recognized to the extent where we have to find our own safe spaces. And I love the sober queer spaces, but part of me wonders why we have to create sober queer spaces. It's because members of the Muslim community don't want to drink. Just because they happen to be queer doesn't mean they want to renounce their cultural heritage and go to a very, very alcohol and drug-fueled queer community in sort of Soho. They still want to keep their principles, so they create these queer sober spaces, which I love, to be honest with you, but it does have, there's a bit of a bittersweet nature to them.
In fact, like the transphobia is so apparent, especially in the anti-gay protest. I mean, there's such transphobia visible by the protesters out there, And for me also, I not just transphobia, even biphobia is very much apparent in not just the civil society, but also within the communities, Vaneet, you want to talk about like what kind of issues you face within the community and outside the communities as a bisexual person?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the big issue when it comes to bisexuality is that people don't think it exists. They think that bisexual isn't a thing. They have a very binary construct of society. There's a concept called monosexism, which is this privileging of sort of straight and gay identities as the ones that are valid above anything else, such as bisexual, asexual, etc. When we talk about sexual identity and sexual orientation. And what that means is that all of these other identities tend to be erased or tend to be subsumed by something else. So when it comes to bisexual, a lot of people think that bisexual is a combination of gay and straight, and therefore we're just sort of undecided or in a phase until we make up our minds or we pick one. And normally that's when we get into a relationship. We get into a relationship, that's us now picking our side. That is the deciding factor. And what often happens is that there's such a focus on our attraction towards men and male-oriented attraction. So when it comes to bisexual men, we're seen as secretly gay and just closeted and in denial, while bisexual women are seen to be basically just trying to gain the attraction of men. They're just sort of a fetishization object. They're an object of desire. And bisexual, non-binary people or agender people, anyone else are just erased because, again, it's just this binary construct of it's gay and it's straight, it's male and it's female, it's black and it's white. There's no thing in the middle. And I hate even saying in the middle, because it's not in the middle of anything. It's just a separate identity. And so what often happens is that even when I enter LGBTQ plus spaces, people will make jokes or say certain things that invalidate any other identities, or just think that they're in a space where it's just gay. It's just gay men. It's just cis gay men, cis white gay men. And it just becomes a really oppressive environment to be in. I've been in places where I'm having a conversation with someone who's also bisexual about our identity or our experiences, or how many people we may have dated or whatever, things that are between bi people. And I've had people butt in and be like, oh, so how do you know that's your identity then? If you haven't done a lot with women, how do you know? And I'm like, how did you know you were gay? Like, this is so stupid. If we have this idea that that you can know your identity when you're 9, 10, 11, whatever it may be, why are we then questioning the identity of someone because they haven't had a certain like dating history or sexual history or romantic? Like, it's so bizarre to me. And we don't ever hold those same principles to gay people or straight people. We don't question them. We say, because but it so often happens with bisexual people, and it's so often because they don't understand that we're valid or that we exist.
Thank you for sharing that thoughts. Really important to talk about it. And Manpreet, you want to talk about your own experience as a bisexual Indian woman of color?
In the documentary, I might have spoken about it from facing discrimination from the cishet community, or just people who identify as straight, in a sense that, like VANEET said, for some reason, sexuality always gears towards men. People believe that bisexual men are just gay, but bisexual women are actually just straight. Like, why is it that it gears toward men? But the thing that actually had upset me the most from all of my experiences is the reaction from the queer community, because I would expect some stupid things from the straight people who'd say dumb things and ignorant, but you just wouldn't expect it from someone who might already understand some form of your struggle. And one thing I've noticed, especially because since the documentary, I've been very involved in Sapphic communities, and lots of pages online and online spaces for Sapphic Asians, just Sapphic people in general. So like women who like women, and a lot of them, because of course we're always praising women, you don't often, it's like sometimes they forget that you're bisexual. So a lot of my friends who identify as lesbian, or they only like women, like when I have the rare moment when I talk about a man, because I mean, I wouldn't say my scale, if people like to say it, is like 50-50, but I'm more leaning towards the side where I do prefer women, but still I like men. And when I often talk about them, my friends almost have they have a sort of shock on their face, and they're like, but why are you talking about this? I don't understand. And I said, well, why not? For God's sakes, like, I'm bisexual. I'm not going to speak about it. And they say, well, it's just really weird here, coming from your mouth. And I say, well, why do you need to tell me that it's weird? I mean, of course, fair enough, you don't hear me say it often, but I don't, that's not something nice to hear, because you are essentially saying that a part of me is just weird, and you would rather just have me conform to this binary thing that we always talk about, being like either gay or straight. Again, there's this idea that people who like, I don't know, like, yeah, when it comes to sexualities, they're so binary that queer spaces don't like bisexuals who take on the appearance of a hetero relationship. And we get a lot of hate where imagine if it's like I don't know, a straight woman and a bisexual man, people would be like, well, that's a hetero relationship. I understand it looks like it, but at the end of the day, you can't erase someone's experience, because that person is not just their relationship. That person is a person who's had an experience about being bisexual. And unfortunately, because we have moments where we can present as cis-het, then that's enough to erase us from the community.
And what is your experience as a singer, as a performer? Do you think you have enough space to perform, and do you get enough opportunities? What's your take on that?
Well, me personally, I've actually just only been starting. So I've actually enrolled in a music course to start this summer now that I'm back in London, because I want to actually start my music career. Because before it was kind of just like a thing that I thought about, but I thought I'm actually going to go into this. And there are spaces for queer people of color to get into music. And I think from the artists that I know, I think if anything, there isn't enough space. I think now that it's kind of more accepted, and there are quite a few, I think, Indian performers that I've seen, Indian bisexual performers. Like there's a rapper who I listen to called Tommy Genesis, who is an Indian bisexual woman, and then there's also the singer Ravina, and there's so many people because you see them, and then because of them other artists start coming. So I actually think there is enough space. If anything, there isn't. I think more people are coming and more people are taking it, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. But I feel like at the moment it looks like all of it's just underground, because there are numerous amounts of queer POC artists that I listen to, but if I even mentioned it to anyone who listens to mainstream music, they wouldn't know who I'm talking about. And I think that's what needs to change. I think there's space, but it's the type of space that we take up. And I think that the space that's saved for mainstream artists, that's saved for radio, there isn't enough. And I think that needs to change.
Since you're going to be leaving early, so I'm going to ask you the next question too. Basically, what has been the reaction of your family members? Have they seen this film, or have you showed them? And what has been your change in your own mind after being part of this documentary?
So I'm planning on showing my siblings this film. I haven't actually gotten around to it because I don't really talk about my identity at home. It's like a unspoken thing. There are so many things that are so taboo where even if I feel like my siblings have an inkling to what my identity is, it's just I can't explain why it's uncomfortable. And I really wish I could. I really wish I could sit there and say that, it's, oh, we should have a mature conversation, but unfortunately we can't. Um, I've spread this film as far as I could to every other person I knew in regards to like friends, colleagues, university, like people, just anyone. And it's all been such a positive response, not a single thing that's remotely negative. So in terms of, I guess, mindsets that have changed in relationships with my family, it hasn't necessarily changed, but I think it's just made me more aware of the type of space that I've been in. And I actually want to relate family to a sort of home. And to me, of course, growing up in Southall, it's actually changed my relationship with this town, because before, um, I I have to admit that I have been quite ignorant to this town, and because I was rejected in my school, I was seen as that weird queer girl, that, well, or even lesbian girl, even though I wasn't, that no one else is out in our year. There's no one, you don't see Indian girls who are also queer. So I already felt that sense of rejection growing up, so I kind of rejected Southall as well. I just told myself, well, this is a really closed-minded space, this is really narrow space, I'm not for it, it's not for me. So I never bothered actually looking around to see what places there are. And that's why I'm so grateful for Rainbow Films, because I would have just continued to look in white spaces. And I'm really glad that this film has really stopped me from doing that, because I had been really lazy, if I'm being honest, in terms of looking for spaces. But I don't want to fault myself. The place that I grew up and the environment I grew up, where online spaces are predominantly white, it made me believe that, well, I only have to look for queer spaces. I don't have to look for queer people of color spaces, because they just don't exist. You'll find queer people of color in a sea of white people. That's just essentially what I thought. And then seeing Hungama, seeing Black Pride, and just seeing so many things that this documentary had opened up for me, made me realize that I need to be proactive in searching for spaces. And now I've become friends with many, many Asian queer women, and just found lots of more queer people of color. And it's really refreshing, because I've had conversations that I never had in my life, and they're really nice having, but before, when I was younger, I would restrict myself from having these conversations, not for any particular reason, just because even like me talking with my straight brown friends about like such sexual subjects and things to do with sex, we just assumed that these conversations weren't for us, because it's not really something that we talk about in our community. But then once I found other queer brown girls who have absolutely, they have no care for the world talking about it, I thought, well, we are allowed to talk about it. So my mind has really, really changed a lot. And it's also made me give a chance on areas that I didn't think I would before. And now I'm just trying to put myself out there as much as I can and look for places that I like. Now I've realized that I want to see people who are exactly like me. I'm no longer going to settle for, oh well, maybe I know someone who relates to me in this way but not in this way. I want to find people who understand every aspect of me and accept every aspect. And that's now how I've changed from this documentary. And it's really been my entire friendship groups, my life has completely changed from this, personally at least.
Wow. So that's really amazing. And Blaise, there you have the power of your documentary already showing up per se. So what did you plan to achieve through this documentary?
I'll just sort of say one bit quickly. So yeah, when I mentioned earlier about intersectionality, I guess I didn't really give you the full story. It's important to mention the fact that because our communities have disproportionate large amounts of transphobia, biphobia, homophobia, it's not our fault, it's because of colonialism, because it's an imported hatred. So I thought I'd just sort of emphasize that. Communities in the UK have progressed, but it's because they've undone their own damage, but we still have a legacy. So I just thought it's important not to give people the impression that we're in some way backwards, when realistically we were more progressive. We were just taught to be slightly less progressive.
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of people actually tend to forget as well, because people always ask me, and I feel like every person of color gets the question. They're like, oh, but are your family accepting of it? And it's really horrible, because when I think about how, at least what I know of Indian history, that drag queens, drag kings, and I think what a lot of people nowadays in India, they call it cross-dressing. And there are so many different terms for it as well, even in all the different languages there. It's existed for so many years, way before the British came. And homophobic laws and laws that forced heterosexuality only came when the British came. So it's really unfortunate that now people have this idea that, well, white communities are more open and accepting, and communities with people of color aren't, because I mean, again, yeah, like RICO said, it's not our fault. It's unfortunately just been put on us. And now it seems like a kind of white savior thing to come in and help the community, whereas there's so many of us, we just don't really know how to, like, it's hard to undo a colonial power when we still live in a time where our voices are being stolen, they're being silenced, and they're being robbed by the majority.
Yeah, I just wanted to say as well that I feel like when it comes to the diaspora, I feel like our communities tend to hold on to the ideas that existed at the time when they left their country, because they feel like that ties them to their country. And that is like, I feel like especially with Indian people in the UK, a lot of it is very much like, this is what it means to be Indian. And that mentality is from 1940s India, where India has moved on and they've changed, and the way that they move obviously still has a long way to go, but they have undone some of the stuff that was put down by colonial rule. But the diaspora in the UK, for example, hold on to a lot of that stuff because they think it's part of their culture, when actually it's not. And if they go back and learn what their culture was like before the British rule, they might actually realize that they're acting in a white way, and a lot of the stuff that they have is actually whiteness that they think is actually their culture. It's a very bizarre construct.
Yeah, and it's sad because they don't even know it. Like they're only doing it just to feel like they have a sense of identity. Like they're not, because they don't want to completely assimilate. They want to keep an aspect of home, and unfortunately, that warped sense of home is what they hold on to. And again, yeah, we can't even blame them. I used to really demonized my parents because of it. And then now I just, if anything, I feel so sorry for them, you know, because I'm like, well, they were forced into this kind of lifestyle and I can't blame them for what they think. And I never will know.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing these thoughts. Like Blaise, so what's the, you think the purpose of making this documentary is kind of fulfilled by the change in reactions by Manpreet and VANEET? So I see that already happening, you know. So what is the, what do you want this film to basically go about and do, apart from talking to people in UK, but how do you see this film talking to people in Asia or South Asia?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first and foremost, the most important thing when we were making this film was that it was in line with our charitable purposes, which was to advance in education for the people who are participating in filmmaking, but also for them to have a platform to be able to contribute somehow to reducing prejudice and discrimination that may be they may be experiencing as a result of being part of different communities. So I think we tick that box, especially when it came to developing the skills, because you know there's layers of this project, and the first and foremost, as I was saying, the most important thing was the impact that it was going to have on the people who actually participated, not just as contributors, but also the people who were involved in the making of the film. So I feel that everybody, and I again, maybe the group can sort of shed some light on this as well, has developed skills, has developed confidence, not just in filmmaking, but also expressing who they are and being comfortable in doing so, and being bold as well, and not afraid to ask for things. I think that was a really great quality as well, is to go and have confidence in yourself to say that, you know, you are valid, you are valuable, and you are able to go to other communities, other, you know, organizations and ask for things, you know. And I think that was a really great thing that they picked up along the way. Impact on the community. Whenever you're making a film, I always say start with the end in mind. You know, think about the impact that you're going to have on the audience, and of course increasing understanding and contributing to reducing those prejudices was the main impact that we had hoped that people would have achieved by it. You know, when you make films as well, you've also got to remember that, you know, you're making films for people who are going to watch it regardless, because they love the genre, they love the content, they love the people. But then you're also making the film for people who need to see this film. Who are the people that will actually take this message away with them, and how will they change as a result of watching it? We're not necessarily looking to change the queer people of color community too much in that respect, more for it to provide a way, a platform for them to make their voices heard. But it's for the rest of the community to receive that information and take that information on board and think differently and approach conversations differently and be more mindful of the experiences of people who they would generally consider as the other in society. So I think we have had great impact with sharing it within our community, sharing it in spaces like Kashish, but we also had an opportunity to share it with, I guess, just the wider community festivals, because there are festivals that aren't LGBT focused that had taken it on board. And similarly with BFI Player, which took it on board as a subscription video on demand service, they played it to straight audiences. And, you know, it's always difficult to measure impact when it comes to films unless you're doing surveys, unless you're getting testimonials, unless you're getting feedback. We've had very positive comments across the board. I do feel, however, we are still impacted by people's prejudices where they just will not watch the film. They'll make their assumptions. They'll come out with all this spiel just off the back of watching a trailer, but they're not going to sit down. They'll never watch the film because they just think, yo, I agree with it. I've had people say that to me. Well, yeah, you do a good film, but I mean, I do agree. The protesters have a point about their kids not being exposed to LGBTQ plus stuff. And I'm like, you don't get the point. It wasn't that they were being exposed to sex and everything. That it was just the fact that it was representation. It was the fact that people exist who are different to you, and you should be able to respect them in the same way that you respect your brothers, your sisters, your family, everything else. So I feel we still have a long way to come. You know, the way around it is one of the things that we thought we could do is tour it around schools. So we have a captive audience. You're going to watch this film because it's part of your curriculum, whether you like it or not. You're not going to have a choice. You'll have to sit down and watch, and you'll have to do an essay about it afterwards. I think that's essentially what we need to try and do, because as I said, they're not going to watch these films unless they're showcased on mainstream media. TV, Channel 4, people are not going to sit down and search for LGBTQ plus content. And people who have these prejudices will never come to Kashish. They'll never come to BFI Flair. So we, in a way, have to think, how do we try and get this audience? And literally, as they say, we don't want to shove it in our face. We have to shove it in your face, because otherwise you're not going to listen and you're not going to care. So that's what we're trying to do with this film eventually, is to get it on bigger platforms. But myself personally, I've taken a kind of vow to say that everything that I'm going to create is queer POC focused, and I've done that. So from now on, every single piece of film, video content that I'm creating is related to the community, and that's my duty, I feel, as a filmmaker, to be able to give back in that respect.
I think that's really interesting to know, because like Kashish basically has started as a platform for mainstream LGBTQ visibility. So we've always been, the festival has been held in a mainstream theater, and basically we have almost 30% of the audience who are non-LGBTQ community members, you know. So for us, that, as you said, this film has to reach the 30% for non-LGBTQ community people, you know, and it should speak to them. And I just hope that more and more people watch this film. RICO, any thoughts on how the film has changed your own life? You're behind the camera, you're shooting the film also, bits and pieces, I think so, right?
I mean, it kind of gave me, I had PTSD when I was filming, so it helped me recover. So I was interviewing people like Lady Phil, Aaron McCarthy from the Beyonce Experience, and hearing some of those stories kind of helped me recover to some extent. I'm now a director at Transaction UK, so CIC, so I do public speaking. I've done speeches for Unilever, Department of Transport. I did one at Parliament recently as well, so I do consultancy work. My job is now a diversity consultant. Yeah, I did some modeling for Gap recently, so it's just...
That was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, I guess it's kind of giving me the confidence, and I've just, yeah, like, it's okay to be different. And I'm now about 7 months on testosterone now, and I'm passable as a guy. You know, I've kind of bulked up, I've moved out. So yeah, it's been necessary, like instrumental. The thing is that it's really weird because BLAISE is in North London, so I don't know why I decided to go to a film training group in North London, but I did, and yeah, best decision I ever made, to be honest with you. So yeah, a lot of thanks to BLAISE.
So thank you for sharing your thoughts, all of you. Really appreciate this. Any closing comment, BLAISE? I'll leave it to you. Anything you want to say before we close this particular Q&A?
I just want to say to anybody who's watching, you know, don't feel like you need to filter yourself or, you know, like take the light away from who you are. Be yourself, be proud in who you are, believe in yourself. There is people out there, there are other people out there like you. There are communities, there are safe spaces. You know, we've showcased some in Pride and Protest, but anybody who's from South Asia or India, I'm pretty sure there's loads of safe spaces and like places like Kashish where you can go and you can meet like-minded people. And, you know, if you're not getting the respect or the happiness that you deserve from your family and your current friend circle because you are who you are, there's always going to be other people who you can relate to. So look out, you know, go search for your community. RICO mentioned this as well, chosen family. You can choose your family. That's what's brilliant about the LGBT community, because once you start getting in there and you find your people who connect with you, you will find the happiness that you deserve. I'm pretty sure. And do check out Pride and Protest. And we hope we win. The first thing that we've won.
So thanks a lot, really. And I wish all of you were in India too. When suppose we had a ground event, we would have invited you people, and it would have been a blast per se having all of you at the theater. But unfortunately, it's going to be online. So whoever is going to be watching this particular video right now, so please put your comments or questions for MANPREET, VANEET, BLAISE, or RICO, and I'll make sure that they see this particular video and answer your questions, whatever it may be, about the role in the film, about their personal lives, but be nice to them, of course, on the comment box. So thank you for joining the Q&A, and please do join us for the award ceremony on September 5th, where we'll be announcing the winners of all the categories, 9 categories at the festival. So thank you for joining this Q&A. Really appreciate you taking time and joining in. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.